Welcome to the Kick Sugar Coach podcast. Join me each week as I interview experts who will share the science of sugar, sugar addiction, and different approaches to recovery. We hope to empower you with the information and inspiration, insights, and strategies you need to break up with sugar and fall in love with healthy whole foods so you can prevent and reverse chronic disease, lose weight, boost your mood and energy. Feel free to go to my website for details on my coaching programs and to access free resources, kicksugarcoach.com. Hello and welcome. Today I have with me Ashleigh Di Lello. Ashleigh is the founder and creator of Bioemotional Healing, a revolutionary method based in neuroscience that helps clients from around the world finally break free from emotional trauma, limiting beliefs, anxiety, chronic pain, and issues with food, including sugar. Despite being told by doctors she wouldn't live past her teenage years and having had significant health challenges, and she had to walk the path of literally entirely, letting go of sugar as a teenager, she refused to give up and discovered the secret to rewiring the mind-body connection that's in a constant biofeedback loop. And she's gone on to become an elite athlete, a TV and Broadway star, entrepreneur, mind coach, and motivational speaker. Welcome, Ashleigh.
Thank you so much, Florence. I'm happy to be here.
Well, your story is incredible. So why don't we start with that? So tell us a little bit about your own journey with health issues and struggles with food and how you sort of pulled yourself through to the other side.
Sure. Yeah, we're going to surmise a 25-year journey here as quickly as we can. I was the epitome of health, as most, 12, 13-year-olds are, and dancing 5 hours a day. And all that changed overnight to then when I was fighting for my life. And I had a rare viral infection. Nobody could diagnose. I went to all the top hospitals across the United States, was tested for just about anything you can think of at that time. And the best they could tell me is I had a rare viral infection that nobody could treat. They couldn't diagnose, and my body was shutting down. I was losing the majority of my hair. I was about 92 pounds. My skin was yellow from my liver shutting down. I was exhausted, got to a place where I could barely lift a finger some days or speak. I had pain in every joint and muscle. I mean, it was it was a completely life-altering experience, from being so strong and healthy, dancing 5 hours a day, to now literally fighting for my life, but also having no answers. And I literally was told by doctors that I would never dance again, never live a normal, active life, never get married, never have children. And I needed to accept I wouldn't live past my teenage years. And literally was told those words, which now as I speak about them, I still can't fathom to this day how strictly I was told to accept really my life was over, and it was one of the most defining moments of my life when I just said, I don't accept this. Like, I just don't accept that I'm dying and that there's nothing we can do. And I just have to go home and die. I walked out of that hospital with my mom, having no idea what we were going to do. We literally had exhausted all efforts that were available to us, or felt like they were available to us at that time, 25 years ago. So that's when we started to just be more aware of nutrition and supplements and functional medicine. And then of course the impact of food, right? So I'm 13 years old. My immune system is fighting this viral infection that is killing me. So all of a sudden, food became life or death to me, right? Either whatever I was eating either added to my immune system or it took away its resources. So suddenly now at 13, eating like most teenagers did, suddenly I didn't really think about food before other than, well, it was food. Now food became crucial, right? A part of my survival. So I wanted to survive. I was willing to do whatever possible. So I did. I became incredibly restrictive and took away sugar and anything else, right, that detracted from my immune system, and became very, very restricted. Now, it was a choice, and I was willing to do that because I was willing to do anything to survive. I wanted to live and I wanted to dance again. But at the same time, it was so restrictive that I literally would think about the food I was going to eat someday, right? When I was, quote, normal, when I was healthy again, because I didn't feel like a normal teenager, not only in obviously how I felt, but not being able to just eat. And it was like, well, how do other people eat all this, quote, bad food and feel good or what looks like good? And if I eat that, my immune system shuts down for 3 to 4 hours. And I've got to really think about what that means for me being able to live. So it was empowering. But the other side of it was I was in such restriction for so many years. I literally had a notebook of the food I was going to eat someday. And I, again, I'm a teenager, but I think we all can probably relate to that when we're like looking forward to eating something and anticipating it. Well, I did this for about 6 years. So I had quite the list, as you can imagine. And it built, through holidays and other things that I could not eat the same other people were. And again, I made that choice, but that other side of it was feeling so deprived of so many things through those years, including food, right? And we all know the social and emotional impact of gathering and eating together and partaking together. So I had this long list of food. So I fought for my life, defied the odds, miraculously slowly built back my strength, got back to dancing, got back to, quote, being normal. Well, now I wanted to eat normal. But then the downside that also happened was my body was being so starved of nutrition for all those years that when I became healthy again, my body was also receiving nutrition for the first time in 6 years. So it went into starvation mode on overdrive. And it all of a sudden was like, oh my gosh, we've been dying. Let's hold on to every single morsel of food that Ashleigh eats just in case we go through dying again, right? So it felt very warranted. So all of a sudden, I'm trying to go back to dance, get my life back, and I gained like 60 pounds in a short amount of time. So now, well, I can't eat, quote, normal. My body is gaining weight when I'm eating the same nutritious foods I had for 6 years. So talk about also a complex relationship with my body, right? First, it was dying. It took my life away, everything I loved. And now we defied the odds, but now I'm living in a body I also don't recognize. And I'm trying to go back to dancing in a body that is a size that feels uncomfortable to me to move in. And now I also can't eat, quote, normal because my body's reacting badly to nutritious food. So, what is it going to do with greasy or sugary foods? Right. So, then that also added another layer of complexion with food. Right. So, we'll come back full circle into this, but I absolutely had to go through a journey of fully healing my relationship with food, both in the way that it had absolutely empowered me and helped save my life, but also that deprivation and restriction mindset, and be so consistent with healing it so that my body could also find its way back to knowing it could process my food, it could metabolize it, it could absorb it, and we weren't going to starve again, right? So that was a journey in and of itself. And then it went to a whole new level 6 years ago when I had a failed hip surgery that launched my whole body into chronic pain. And it was my second life altering health experience. And it was very deja vu, took my professional career away. I had a 2-year-old daughter that now I couldn't hold or play on the floor with or pick up. And I went from an elite athlete to barely being able to walk or hold a book. And now I was in chronic nerve pain throughout my whole body. And to the same point of the original experience, I was a mystery. The best they could say was my nervous system had flipped a switch into pain. And now I was being told I was a chronic pain patient. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, chronic regional pain syndrome, interstitial cystitis, all these lifelong pain conditions that I was told now were going to define my life and I'd never live an active life again. So it was very deja vu, but so much more challenging because I'm a mother, I'm a business owner, I'm a wife, I'm an adult. And again, the ramifications were so huge on my life. So after trying everything for several years, over 200 types of injections, anything in Western, Eastern, functional, regenerative, holistic, because now we have so many more options than I even did when I was sick, everything failed. And so knowing what I did from what I went through when I was younger and not to just accept this is my life. Well, I dove into pain first and understood that all of it comes from the brain. So I thought, well, if it comes from the brain, then that means I can do something about it. And if my nervous system flipped a switch into pain, I'm going to figure out how to flip it back. So that's when I self-studied neuroscience about 4 or 5 hours a day, dove into it. And what I saw missing was all these different great modalities, but nobody had a process, like a step-by-step process. This is how you partner with your brain and nervous system to rewire not just pain, but anything, any pattern physically, mentally, or emotionally that now have become conditioned, and healing all the different pieces of my life that were contributing to that stress response, and getting my brain and nervous system to a place of literally getting out of fight or flight, which they had essentially been subconsciously hardwired in since I was 13. I just didn't know it until that surgery just took it over the edge, and realizing that it's never just one thing, but going back through and healing all those different pieces so that my brain could get out of fight or flight and I could heal and rewire that pain and my own anxieties around my health and PTSD I'd been carrying for 25 years. And yes, healing that relationship with my body at a whole new level. And that's what took me on my journey of creating bioemotional healing, and not just getting free myself, but then that becoming my life's work to help other people.
It's gobsmacking. It's an incredible story, Ashleigh, and so incredible that you're hacking how to, how to help other women, other men and women, I'm sure, follow in your footsteps of such radical, incredible healing that did not come from outside. It had to come from this deep will to live, and then an understanding of how to work with your own nervous system, and then how to share the step, pardon me, the step-by-step process so other people can turn off that because really it sounds to me what you're saying is that incredible stress from being nearly on your deathbed at 13 and all the trauma of that, food trauma just being a part of it, and realizing that got locked into the body and it set you up for this profound stress response is what it sounds like, and that the stress was not ever turned off.
Yeah. And it makes sense because even through my professional career, I had a ton of injuries, to the point where it just almost didn't make sense, because I also took better care of my body than almost anyone. And we were on Broadway doing 8 shows a week, which was very intense, but I was always taking care of my body nutritiously, ice baths, massage, PT, but then I would get hurt. And it didn't make sense other than, well, okay, your body's really been through hell and back, but I didn't really feel like that was the case. And an understanding that that stress response was still running. And I did have a failed hip surgery. They left a hole in my hip, but the violent way in which my body reacted to it wasn't just because a hole was left. It was my brain and nervous system having a cellular memory of everything I've ever gone through, and not just being this tipping edge to push me over the threshold. And that's like with, any people who are like, man, I've always struggled with this, or I've always struggled with food, or I've struggled with anxiety, but then this happened in my life and now I feel totally out of control, right? And my anxiety is at a whole new level, or my depression, or like I'm in this emotional eating cycle that like is I can't get out of this time, right? It's like how long that stress response just keeps adding up, and then there's a tipping point, right, where it goes over the edge, and then we just get really stuck in that stress response. And what that looks like is so individual, based upon our own life experiences, right? Our own biodiversity, every single thing in our life that we've experienced, said, done, heard, felt, our emotions, our traumas, our injuries. The brain and nervous system take all of that into account, into what stress they create from a place of protection. And that's what's so important to understand is the brain is always operating from a place of protection. And it is cross-referencing all that data in your life to create a stress response to protect you from something, right? And it feels like punishment more often than not, but the brain is trying to protect you from some emotional threat or physical threat or mental threat. And neuroscience has shown that the brain perceives emotional threats similarly to physical threats. So even to something we were talking about before, if we're thinking about food, like I said, it's never about the sugar, but there's something still unhealed, unresolved in your system, and it's creating stress. And how do we try to address that without actually addressing it? Well, we look for something that gives us an outlet, something that gives us comfort or a sense of control or familiarity. And that's why food and sugar in of itself can become that go-to mechanism that helps you feel temporarily better. But because we're not actually pulling out what's happening in the system, sugar continues to hold that power, right? Because you've got to deal with it some way. And since you're not processing it out, well, something has to help you, quote, deal with it in the moment. But we all know that in of itself just makes it worse through time. It's a vicious cycle that feels good in that moment, but much worse later.
Right, right, right. And pardon me, I do come from the abstinence first approach, but probably because by the time people wind up on the path of recovery and willing to work with the coach, they're like you when you were 13. They know they're saving their life. And they know that in order to get to the next, the deeper recovery work that you're talking about, they got to unhook from this stuff because they're diabetic, they're depressed, they have cancer, they have diabetes, right? Like their lives are on the line, and they know that they need to have this. I need to let this go, but there's so much fear, so much fear of like, will life be worth living? Can I cope? I'll feel so deprived, the pain of deprivation, right? You've lived this all.
Mm-hmm.
And also you've lived to say, hey, listen, I did pull out sugar and damn, it was hard and it saved my life and I'm grateful. But I then had to go back and repair that relationship to food itself so that I could eat whole foods and sort of like stop feeling like my body was constantly and like just get it in. Let's gain more weight, right? Let's compensate for this deprivation that you're doing. And then you had to go, all right, what's really going on here? What's really going on here? So where do people begin to imagine? Like, I think it's not a stretch that most of us understand that when we have physical symptoms, it's our body's best efforts to communicate,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so do you want to speak about that? Is that your philosophy as well?
Well, yeah, I mean, to the point, our brain and our body always do something for a reason, right? And they're both designed to protect us and preserve us. So I think part of the conditioning that hurts us is we aren't really taught to listen from that standpoint. We're taught to feel like our brain and our body kind of work against us. They're our enemy, right? Those cravings or those pains or those symptoms, that is your body working against you. That's your brain working against you. And I absolutely know what it's like at the deepest level to feel like my body's my greatest enemy, right? I know that as about as deep as you can get, but it's the first part to really, really being able to change that is to see and understand and accept that they're always communicating from a place of protection. And that protection is designed based upon our life. So traumas, right? Things and traumas aren't just things that happen to us. It's anything that alters the brain and the body. So significant things in our life, right? That altered us, that changed us, that had a huge emotional impact on us. Anytime that's happened, the brain takes a snapshot of that whole experience and it embosses it neurologically and it keeps it at the forefront so that it doesn't happen again. But in that, we're kind of always reliving that at a subconscious level. And that keeps us in stress. And a lot of times we haven't done the work to really sit through and process and forgive or let go or really evaluate the belief systems that came from it about ourselves, our life, our health, our worth, right? Worth is such a common thread of people that internal struggle, right? And that's where even food and sugar in of itself gives you that sense of worth for a moment in terms of acceptance, right? And those feel good endorphins that happen. So it's really first being aware, what is my brain and body trying to communicate? What is the stress that it's still holding on to, that is a burden to it? Because everything we've gone through, the brain is a data bank of it. But on the other side of that, everything we have experienced emotionally, the body has a memory of, right? Thoughts are the language of the brain, but emotions are the language of the body. And so much of those deeply emotional experiences in our life, we haven't really processed out. We haven't allowed or felt or grieved or, like I said, forgiven. And the body holds on to that. And that creates a lot of stress. And then we keep living a life that completely adds more, right? And I have no doubt that that's also why we saw such a huge compounding of mental and emotional challenges with COVID, because everybody already had their own, right? But we're busy and we're living life, and then we add a universal, like, worldwide stress and life altering experience. And again, it just pushed over the edge, and we didn't have as much distractions. We couldn't travel and go and do, so we kind of were left alone with ourselves more and our own thought processes and our own bodies. And because that can be really uncomfortable, and you start to more see how you talk about yourself, how you feel in your body, and we couldn't distract or be so busy in a way that we didn't have to address that, it tipped a lot of people, over the edge. And that's been a really devastating thing to watch. But the plus side of that, it's also given a lot of people an opportunity to go, oh my gosh, I got to deal with this, like, and to do the deeper healing and to really confront themselves and how life has impacted them, so they can step beyond it and really come out stronger and more whole and healed and more free from not just being impacted by life in the way it's shaped them, but truly now choosing, right? So in that
Amazing.
point.
Yes. So let's talk about the steps then. So you've kind of figured out a way to get this, to get the deeper healing recovery work done, to get to the root cause of things and to pull it up and to invite the body and the mind to sort of heal and to process past stress and trauma so that you can be clear of that, and you can just deal with life as it comes going forward. There's not like this backlog of stress in the body that makes us sick. So what are the steps? Like, how do people begin this journey of this deeper healing recovery journey?
Yeah. So obviously the process I go through with my clients is 9 weeks long, and that is in depth. But I know, where do you even start, right? So if somebody's not ready for that, but just literally, where do I even start? Because I know when we start talking about neuroscience and the mind body connection, it can feel incredibly overwhelming. And that's why, aside from what I do with my clients, I wanted people to have a resource of, like, this is some steps. This is where you can at least start and not feel so overwhelmed. And so I have a free mind body blueprint they can get from my website, download. It's free. And that's a 3-step process to just start to disrupt that stress pattern, that negative thought loop, the strong emotions you feel in your body, whether that's anxiety or depression or lack of self-worth, and to start to change that cycle, because we are all stuck in our patterns. We're habitual. The brain wants to always repeat what it's done before. So that means the same thoughts, the same emotions, and the same behaviors. And again, it doesn't do that to hurt us, but the brain wants to preserve as much energy as possible because it's controlling the whole body. So whatever's familiar, it can do reflexively. And that's why I'm sure people have been like, I just ate this whole bag and I didn't really want to. But I've done that so many times before. Well, the brain doesn't have to think about doing that. To not eat it, to step away and go do something else, that requires a lot of energy from the brain to do something different. So just so people understand, it is a very powerful force in each of our brains to do what we've done before. And that's why it can be challenging because the brain's biologically hardwired to not change. Okay. So we have to start disrupting that cycle. And that's where this mind body blueprint is a part of that. Okay. So there's three letters, which is an acronym ACT, ACT, right? So that's really easy to remember too, because we want to act differently, right, in our life. So the first is the A stands for awareness. And we've all heard this word, and it's a really like popular buzzword now. But if we really think about it, most of us don't really sit with ourselves and observe what we're thinking, what we're doing. We're really good at observing it in others, but because our brain's so habitual, we just do what we've always done. We think how we've always thought. We act like we always have, right? We feel how we always feel. And we've all said, well, this is just me. This is who I am. This is what my brain does. This is what I do. We want to start creating some space between stimulus, whether it's a thought, a feeling, a person, a stress, an event, a place, and your response. Because if we don't create space, the brain will just automatically look at your history, your data bank of history, and just say, oh, that's what we did last time we were here, or last time we had this emotion, or something similar. And it will just say, oh, let's do this. Right. And that's why it's so powerful. In a nanosecond, we want to do what we've always done before. So, this first step act is starting to become aware of our own entire internal dialogue, our own selves, to create space. Like we are the observer of what's happening versus just reacting to everything we've done before, and just really becoming that habitual person that every day, right? Like I even tell my clients, start paying attention to how you talk to yourself in the morning when you get ready, right? Because even that we don't question, and we just run those thoughts. And all of a sudden, even that, you're like, whoa, that's some pretty awful dialogue about myself, about life, right? We're trying to observe, or I'm feeling a lot of anxiety in my body. Well, what just happened? Right? What just happened that might trigger something that happened in the past, right? Really starting to observe. And the reason why I use the word observe is we're not there to judge. An observer is not there to judge, because we all know we're incredible at being our worst critics. But criticism, self-criticism, activates the brain's alarm bells, which sends more stress signals, which just will amplify whatever stress we're trying to change. So if we understand that an observer isn't there to judge or criticize, it's to understand and start to see patterns, to see habitual patterns of thought or emotions, and understand better what's happening and what they're connected to. That makes sense? So
Yeah.
they can go through, and I tell more about it, but I'll obviously in this interview just give an overview. So that's ACT, A for awareness. C is connect to the body. Connect to the body in as an alliance, right? With questions and breath. Because to the point of what I mentioned earlier, we are more programmed to fight our bodies, to shut down whatever they're feeling, right? If you have a symptom, shut it down as quick as possible. Don't ask questions. Don't see what it's connected to. If you have a craving, just respond to it, right? And I know those cravings can feel very physical, right? And like a need. We're just shut it down. How do I get rid of this? How do I fulfill this as soon as possible? Or when we have something uncomfortable in our body, our instinct then is to fight it. Fight, again, activates the brain's alarm bells. That just activates more fight or flight, more stress in the body. So the goal is to start connecting to our body with breath to help calm down the body. And there's a lot of different modalities of breath, and I share some in this mind body blueprint. But sometimes when the mind is racing, it's really hard to get control of the mind with the mind. So when we can control our physiology first and get that to calm down, then we have sometimes a much greater avenue into getting the mind to calm down, right? Because of that constant feedback loop between the brain and the body. And if the body's feeling stressful, the mind's going to feel stressful, and so forth. So that's where, when we can connect with breath instead of like rigidity and tightness and fighting, that helps calm down that stress response. And then we can ask questions, right? What has just happened? Am I feeling something physical, or is this emotional that I'm feeling physical, right? Because we know emotions are felt physically. That's why we've all said, like, I feel sick to my stomach, right? I've got a headache when we're stressed. I'm lightheaded and dizzy. I'm so nervous, or like our bladder will hold. Like the body speaks emotionally. So instead of trying to shut it down, we want to start listening and asking questions to better understand what's happening and why, and therefore ourselves and the stress response. And then, of course, we want to do something different. So T stands for take action. And that's with our thoughts and with direct action. So becoming aware of what's running and deciding what we want to think instead, right? Yep. I always tell my clients, yep, you might think that way. You might feel that way. Do you want to think and feel that way? Do you want that to be true for your life? Because we do know that words shape our life. Our subconscious mind is always listening to our conscious mind and the words it speaks to decide who we are and how we should feel and what we should do. So there is a point we have to take responsibility and decide what we want that to be and take action on that. It's like every day I literally felt like I was dying, but I had to decide I'm healing. My body is healing, because your brain is wired to seek evidence to validate what we say. So I can either say I'm dying and my brain can look for evidence for that, which is really easy, or I can say I'm healing. It's like people, I want you to just understand, I'm not saying this isn't true to your experience, but every time you're saying I'm addicted to sugar, I have no power over sugar, sugar holds all the control, you're directing your brain for that to be true. Right? I'm not saying it's not true to your experience, but the more you speak it, the more your brain thinks that is who you have to be. And it will seek evidence and it will push actions, because the brain has to operate in alliance with what we say we are. So you have to understand that you've got to start reining in that conversation. I'm not saying it hasn't been true in the past, but do you want it to be true in the future? Then you got to start changing those words and stop directing your brain to continue to affirm that that's part of your identity, because you'll never gain power over it while you continue to speak that you have no power over it. Right. So that's an example of taking control of thoughts and words, but then actions. How do I disrupt this cycle? Well, in the past, I would do this. Well, what can I do differently now? What do I want to do? What do I need to do? What am I seeking? And with asking those questions before, you might be seeking comfort, connection, a sense of control and safety. You might be literally needing to sit with yourself and process out emotions instead of stuffing them down and therefore looking to sugar. Like, the whole idea is to really start to take control of what's happening so we can start changing it, because nobody can do it but us. No one lives inside our mind and body but us. And so if we really want something different, we have to start doing something different. And this mind body blueprint is a beautiful, just 3-step action to start disrupting that patterned reaction of behaviors and thoughts and emotions that we all have, because we're habitual creatures. But if we start disrupting it, the beautiful thing about the brain is every time we make a new choice, we're changing those neural connections every single time. So we are always shaping our brain. We're either re-solidifying old patterns, or we're starting to break those apart so we can have the opportunity to do something different.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. So back to the whole, that I am an addict, I'm a sugar addict, and how it just becomes a part of the identity and so much harder to overcome when you've locked yourself in that way. I tend to say I have an addiction, or I have a sugar addiction, but it isn't a part of my identity. I just recognize that for me, my body, when I have a little, once I have a little, I don't feel like I have the control over how much I'm going to eat or how often. Like, that sort of takes on a life of its own, and I don't like it. So I choose to abstain. But I can imagine that if I was to disrupt even that story, it would be through something like, I used to crave sugar, or sugar used to be something of interest to me. Or I love that I no longer crave or need sugar for any pleasure or to get through life or to deal with stress. Like, it's all in the sense of like, it's behind me and it's over.
Yes. Yeah, that's the key, right? Most of us are just creatures of our past because that's how the brain operates. So it's about being present today. So you could even, to that point, what does addiction? It holds power over you, right? Whatever that addiction is, there's a sense of helplessness and powerlessness. So even just like I hold the power now. Like I am more powerful than sugar, right? And I hold that power. And then it's very empowering. And it's not that we don't have to be honest with ourselves, to your point. And I know with all different addictions, the first point is accepting, and that's the hardest part, because as long as you live in denial, then you can't change anything, right? And so you're very right in that that's a crucial step of acceptance, because denial will absolutely keep you in that cycle forever. So, but you can do that with the separation of like, I acknowledge, like, I have had an addiction. I have an addiction, but I don't want to always have an addiction, right? So, who do I want to be? And even that statement, I'm powerful. I'm way more powerful than food. I'm more powerful than sugar. And that's what's going to define the rest of my life, right? That's not eliminating that you might have more of a tendency, right? Some people, to that point, with sugar, with alcohol, they can do it leisurely and it not overhaul them. Other people can't. And that absolutely is that part of knowing who we are and living from that standpoint, but then also actively saying and projecting who we are now and who we will be in the future. And you can just say that, like, I'm more powerful than sugar, without that eliminating the fact that it has been powerful in your life, but you now are more powerful. And that doesn't mean you all of a sudden start diving into it every day, right? But it just also changes that conversation and keeps reaffirming your power now.
Yes. And it's interesting because the technique that worked for me came out of the rational recovery world. That is exactly what they teach, right? It's a 3-step process. You observe the urge, you identify the voice of the inner addict, right? You can hear the words, it suggests and it justifies the consumption, the exceptions, the, oh, it's no big deal, right? The whole denial. Then you observe it. Oh yeah, I can feel that urge to go and whatever, partake in that. And then you learn to ignore it because it has absolutely no power. The urge cannot move your body. So it's exactly that process. And then you learn, I am not my addiction. Sure, my body might respond that way to refined carbohydrates. And for that reason, I choose, right? I choose to abstain. But it's very much, it's the dead opposite of I'm powerless. It is, you have all the power. All the power. It was a total misunderstanding. It was just this big puffy fish with spikes that you were terrified of, but it's like, it's nothing. It's like, it's just an urge.
It's something I always told my clients too, because again, that subconscious behavior response is so powerful to then reach for it, put it in your mouth. And I'm like, listen, no one has handheld fed you since you were a toddler. Like, you are the one in charge of what you put in your mouth. But you just got to start recognizing that and standing in that and giving yourself that space to decide it. Yep. You know what? I can choose to eat that. That's in my total choice, right? No one is shoving that into my mouth, but giving you that space to say, do I want to? Does that really serve my life and my emotional well-being and my physical well-being past this maybe 30 seconds, right? Or minute. And if you give yourself that, oh no, then the rest of the day and tonight I'm going to live in hell and I'm going to feel guilt. I'm going to feel shame. And I just tell my clients, how do you want to feel when you go to bed tonight? Right? How do you want to feel when you wake up in the morning? And remember, you are in charge, and that's so important too, that honing back to that journey of we're in charge of the meanings in our life too. Like, we have such a connected meaning with life and food. And like when we're with friends and we've got to eat the same foods and it's not a celebration if you don't have that cake, and it's not a holiday unless you eat that pie. Like it's such a programmed connection. And I'm not saying that it has roots. But again, you get to decide the meaning. So a huge part of me healing was like, well, no, being a normal human being is being able to be at those moments in time and have help and be able to connect to people and have conversations. That's really why I want to be there. And the memories and food is a part of that, but it is not it. And if we're really honest with ourselves, often the food will dominate what we're really there for, what we're really seeking connection and memories and fun. And then if you're wanting to change your eating habits and you do eat that sugar, then that guilt and shame is literally overcoming all the good as well. Right. So we get to decide the meaning. Is this really about, I'm missing out if I don't eat the food, or am I missing out if I'm not here being able to be present and connect and have joy and feel good in my mind and my body? And we also, to that same point, get to take charge of our meanings. It's like with my husband's family, I often just bring my own food just because I've become so conditioned to eating in a way that supports my body and healing, and it's anti-inflammatory. And obviously that was also important with healing pain. And my mother-in-law is great, and she just accepts it and knows that it doesn't bug me. It doesn't bother me to bring my own food and still sit at the table and eat with everyone. It doesn't bother me, and I remember she asking me years ago, like, does that make you feel bad? And I was like, no, it doesn't, because I feel so fulfilled. I feel better physically when I eat this food. So that therefore makes me feel better emotionally and mentally. I'm supporting my body and I'm here with everyone. That's really all that it matters to me. So I don't feel deprived, right? I'm giving myself what I need, and I'm here with the people, right? So we also, as we change the meanings in our life, we also feel more empowered to show up differently and live differently. And then what could have been seen as deprivation or restriction is now something that empowers you. Right? So that's also so important. And it never bothers me. It's like, well, I love food. I love my food too, but I also love life and people. And that's really what holidays and celebrations are ultimately about. So we also need to take food's power away from social gatherings and holidays so that we don't feel like, well, if you're not partaking of the food, you're somehow missing out on the celebration. And I just don't think that's true.
Incredible. Love it. Awesome. Do you have any final words you would like to share on the topic of women and our body mind connection and food and sugar?
Yeah, it's just that same point. I want people to know they are powerful. And I know to some point or another, we've all felt powerless and stuck and like a prisoner to these stress responses or our mind or our body. And the reason why I love the brain so much is unless we really have true mental illness or a brain injury, the functionalities of the brain are the same for each of us. So we all are powerful. Aside from personality or intellect or talent, we have that same capacity. And we just have to learn how to harness it and step into it and believe that we don't have to feel powerless to anything else in our life. And I just want people to have that hope and start to understand that they don't have to live powerless their whole lives.
Incredible. I just had this image of let's say like a piece of technology that's quite sophisticated, right? We've just learned some of the most basic features, or we barely know how to work it. So it's kind of running on automatic pilot, but the potential for this technology, it could do this and it could do that, but we got to learn how to work with this superpower called our brain. And if we don't learn how to do it, it's just because of our environmental circumstances, it got programmed and it's just going to keep plugging away at the patterns that, from the past, as opposed to saying, okay, I'm now going to program this brain to create a future, a better future.
Yeah, we're the creators. And if we don't take conscious control of it, the brain will absolutely default to what it has already experienced. So we just have to make that decision. Oh my gosh, I got to really take control of this. And I can, because ultimately, that is my power. I am directing my brain. I just have to take conscious active control of it every day, or it will default. But we can condition it. The brain can change until the day we die. Isn't that amazing? It's the only organ that can literally change until the day we die. And so I've had my oldest client today is 84. So many people then, right? I've been stuck too long. What's it worth now? And she's my like superhero. I totally respect her for believing, you know what? Doesn't matter. I want to live the rest of my life the way that I want to. Even, she definitely wishes she could go back, but that's to that point is we often write ourselves off because of time, or it's too late. It's never too late. It becomes the time when we choose it, and we choose that we want to live more and take that power back. And everybody can. Absolutely.
I love it. Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time, for your work. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Florence. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in today. Thanks for tuning in this week. If you would like more interviews, more information, and more inspiration on how to break up with sugar, go to my YouTube channel, Kick Sugar Coach, or my website, kicksugarcoach.com. See you next week.